Ladies and gentlemen, there is a peculiar assumption quietly woven into the fabric of our times that faith is a relic of an age when people knew less. We are told, with a faint air of intellectual superiority, that as knowledge grows, belief must wither. Progress, they say, leaves no room for ancient truths. But let us pause and ask, is this the inevitable march of human thought, or have we merely exchanged one set of unexamined assumptions for another? Faith, in the popular mind, is often portrayed as a leap in the dark. Yet, the leap is far less blind than many suppose. The foundation of Christian belief is not a vague, sentimental comfort, but a series of historical claims, moral insights, and human experiences that invite reason to examine them. Christianity, far from asking us to discard our intellect, bids us bring it along. Reason is not faith's enemy, it is its ally, its compass, its testing ground. Some will say, we live in an age of science. Miracles and divine purposes belong to the past. But science itself is built upon faith. Faith that the universe is intelligible, that the laws we observe today will hold tomorrow, that our minds are capable of grasping reality. These are not conclusions reached through the microscope or the telescope. They are the presuppositions that make science possible. And so, it is with faith in God. It provides the soil in which reason grows, the light by which we discern truth, the foundation beneath, all-knowing. Our ancestors may have lacked the tools we now possess, but they were no strangers to doubt, to skepticism, to the long wrestling between belief and unbelief. The human heart has always asked, what is the meaning of my existence? What is the source of moral obligation? What hope, if any, lies beyond death? The modern mind does not escape these questions simply by having faster machines or clearer images of distant galaxies. Indeed, our progress has sharpened them. Consider morality. We may try to explain it as a product of social evolution, a convenient fiction for survival's sake. But if morality is nothing more than instinct or convention, then no person has the right to say that justice is better than injustice, mercy better than cruelty. Yet we speak and feel as if some things are truly right, others truly wrong. This stubborn fact points beyond mere biology to a lawgiver whose character is the very source of goodness. And if such a lawgiver exists, then belief is not an escape from reality, it is the recognition of it. Or take the question of meaning. Many voices insist that life is the accidental byproduct of an indifferent universe, that our loves, our griefs, our triumphs, and our tragedies are but chemical reactions on a small rock in an unfathomable void. But the human spirit rebels against such emptiness. We hunger for significance as we hunger for bread. We long for beauty, for truth, for a purpose that is not swallowed by death. This longing, like thirst, suggests that there is something that can quench it. The God of Christianity does not scold us for this hunger. He claims to be its satisfaction. Some object that belief requires certainty, and certainty is impossible. Yet we live our entire lives on something less than absolute proof. We marry without proof that love will endure. We invest in education without proof of success. We step into an airplane without proof that it will land safely. In each case, we weigh the evidence, consider the risks, and commit ourselves. Faith, at its heart, is of the same kind. It is the commitment of the whole self to the truth as one has reason to see it. Others fear that belief is the enemy of freedom, that to submit to a divine will is to surrender one's mind. But freedom without truth is only the liberty to drift without direction. The ship that refuses any course for fear of the captain's orders will never reach harbor. True freedom is not found in casting off all authority, but in discovering the right authority and aligning with it. And if the author of life is who he claims to be, then his commands are not chains, but compass points. We live in a world that exalts choice yet struggles to define what is worth choosing. We are awash in information but starved for wisdom. The modern person, armed with a smartphone and drowning in data, can still be lost. It is not enough to know how things work. We must know what they are for. Christianity, if true, answers that question, not with a vague sense of optimism, but With a coherent vision of reality, one in which reason and belief are not adversaries but traveling companions, and so in the clamor of new ideas and the glare of new inventions, we may yet find that the oldest truths are the ones that endure, not because they are old, but because they are true. Reason will not lead us away from faith. It will lead us to the threshold, and faith will invite us inside. Ladies and gentlemen, when we speak of faith and reason, too often we are invited to imagine them as two armies in opposition, each seeking the destruction of the other. The modern ear has been trained to think that to embrace faith is to surrender the mind, to turn one's back upon the cool, steady light of reason in favor of the warm but flickering candle of emotion. This, however, is a grievous misunderstanding. Faith and reason are not adversaries locked in eternal combat. They are, in truth, allies marching together in pursuit of the same end, the discovery of what is true. Reason is the God-given faculty by which we weigh, compare, and test ideas, separating the sound from the unsound. Faith is the trust we place in that truth once we have perceived it. The man who believes without reason has built his house upon the sand, but the man who refuses to believe until every question has been answered with absolute certainty will never build at all, for there is no corner of life where such perfect knowledge is available to us. We trust every day without realizing it. We trust the pilot to land the aircraft, though we cannot verify his training. We trust the physician's diagnosis, though we have not ourselves mastered anatomy. We trust the memory of a friend, though we cannot relive the moment they recount. None of this is blind faith. It is reasoned trust, grounded in evidence sufficient to justify action, that in matters of ultimate concern, questions about God, morality, and the meaning of life, the partnership between faith and reason becomes even more essential. Reason leads us to see that the universe is not self-explanatory, that the moral law written in the hearts of men points to something, or rather someone, beyond ourselves. We reason our way to the threshold of belief by considering the order and beauty of creation, the stubborn persistence of moral duty, even when it costs us dearly, the hunger in the human spirit for something that nothing in this world seems able to satisfy. These are not fancies or idle speculations. They are observations, as real as the gravity that keeps our feet on the ground. Reason does not tell us everything about the one who is the source of all this, but it tells us enough to make faith a rational next step. Faith, then, takes the hand of reason and leads it where reason alone cannot go, not because reason fails, but because reality is too vast to be contained within the limits of human logic. Imagine standing before a great mountain range. Reason can measure the height, trace the lines of the ridges, chart the rivers that descend from its slopes. But only faith can give you the courage to begin the climb, trusting that what lies beyond the horizon is worth the effort. Faith is not the abandonment of reason, but its fulfillment. When reason has shown us that God exists, faith accepts the invitation to know Him. There is a peculiar arrogance in the belief that we must see the end of the path before we take the first step. In our daily lives, we are content to act on probabilities and reasonable conclusions. We plant a seed, trusting it will grow, because countless seeds before it have done so under similar conditions. We marry, trusting in the character of the one we love, though the future is unknown. We invest our time, our resources, and our hearts based on the evidence before us, not the certainty of sight. To refuse to do the same in the realm of faith is not prudence, but paralysis. Reason points the way, and faith has the courage to walk it. The harmony between faith and reason is not only possible, it is necessary if either is to flourish. Reason without faith becomes cold, sterile, and ultimately cynical, trapped in endless analysis with no place to rest. Faith without reason becomes credulous, vulnerable to every passing fancy or persuasive voice, no matter how false. Together, they form a sturdy bridge across the chasm of uncertainty, enabling us to pass from mere speculation to the living experience of truth. The mind seeks understanding, but the heart longs for commitment. Faith satisfies both by resting upon the solid ground that reason has prepared. To live as if faith and reason are at odds is to live divided, always suspicious of half of oneself. But to live in the union of the two is to be whole, to think deeply and trust wisely, to question earnestly and believe steadfastly. This is not the surrender of intellect, but the engagement of it at its highest capacity. The one who has married faith and reason walks with both eyes open, one fixed upon the evidence, the other upon the promise, each confirming the other's sight. In this companionship lies the surest path to truth, for the God who invites us to believe is the same God who has given us minds to think, and in his design, the two are never meant to be torn apart. Ladies and gentlemen, when we look at the world around us, we find that it is far from perfect. It is filled with beauty, yes, but also with tragedy, injustice, and pain. Some take this as evidence against the existence of a good and loving God, reasoning that if such a being existed, he would not permit such suffering. Yet this very recognition that something is wrong with the world betrays a deeper truth. We believe in a standard of goodness by which we measure the world and find it wanting. Without that standard, we could not call anything unjust any more than a man could call a line crooked without first knowing what a straight line is. This awareness of right and wrong is not something we invent. It is something we discover as constant and unchanging as the laws of mathematics. Even those who deny moral absolutes find themselves appealing to them when they have been wronged, revealing that the moral law is written not in books alone, but in the human heart. The existence of this moral law raises a profound question. Where did it come from? Nature, in its blind processes, can explain the survival of the fittest, but it cannot explain why we ought to protect the weak or why treachery is wrong even when it succeeds. If morality were nothing more than an evolutionary convenience, we could discard it whenever it became inconvenient. And yet, we do not. Even in the darkest corners of human history, we find that men justify their actions not by denying morality, but by twisting it to suit their purposes, proving that the law remains in force even when it is misapplied. This points to something higher than ourselves, a mind that has impressed this standard upon us, that if the moral law points us to a lawgiver, then reason compels us to ask what kind of being this is. A moral law that demands justice but ignores mercy would crush us, for none of us perfectly keeps it. A moral law that preaches mercy but ignores justice would cheapen the good, for would treat right and wrong as interchangeable. The balance of these two, the righteous demand for justice and the gracious offer of mercy, finds its fullest expression in the Christian vision of God. Here is a God who is perfectly just, holding the universe to account, and yet perfectly loving, offering forgiveness to those who turn toward him. Reason sees in this a harmony that answers both the stern voice of conscience and the aching need for grace. But reason alone cannot bridge the gap between knowing the moral law and living in accordance with it. Every one of us has at some point failed to meet its standard. The man who condemns dishonesty has told a lie. The one who praises generosity has withheld what he could have given. The one who prizes purity has entertained thoughts that fall short of his own ideals. This universal failure is not an excuse, it is a diagnosis. It tells us that the problem is not merely in the systems we build or the societies we shape, but in the human heart itself. Reason makes us aware of the disease. Faith opens us to the cure. There is a peculiar irony in the way people respond to this diagnosis. Some deny it altogether, insisting that they are good enough as they are. Yet they cannot live consistently with that belief, for they still expect others to treat them with fairness and honesty, appealing to the very moral standard they claim to reject. Others admit the standard, but try to meet it by their own strength, like a man attempting to jump across a chasm that is far wider than he imagines. Reason shows us that neither denial nor self-reliance will do. We need help from outside ourselves, from the one who gave the law and knows how it can be fulfilled in us. This realization does not diminish human dignity, it deepens it. To acknowledge that we are creatures under moral law is to affirm that our lives have meaning, that our choices matter, and that our actions are measured by more than mere human opinion. It is to say that there is a true north by which the compass of life is set, and that it is not ours to change at will. This gives weight to our joys, to our sorrows, to our labors, for they are not random movements in an indifferent universe. They are part of a moral drama, whose author is both just and merciful. And yet, the moral law does more than indict us. It points us toward what we were meant to be. When we act in kindness, we feel a resonance, as though we are in tune with the deepest order of reality. When we choose integrity over gain or sacrifice over selfishness, we sense that we have done something that matters beyond the moment. These experiences are not illusions. They are glimpses of the life for which we were made. They are the whisper of the 𝗬𝗶𝗿 calling us back to himself, offering not only the command to do what is right, but the promise of the strength to do it. In this light, the moral law is not merely a constraint, but a gift. It is not there to rob us of freedom, but to show us what true freedom looks like. A train is freest not when it leaves the tracks, but when it runs upon them as intended. So we are freest not when we ignore the moral law, but when we live in harmony with it. Reason shows us the tracks. Faith gives us the courage to stay on them, even when the journey is hard. And in that journey, we find not only the meaning of life, but the one who gave it. Ladies and gentlemen, faith is often misunderstood as a blind leap into the dark, an abandonment of reason in favor of comforting illusions. Yet true faith is not the enemy of reason, it is its fulfillment. Reason alone can take us far. It can show us patterns in the world, uncover truths about nature, expose contradictions in our thinking, and even reveal moral principles that seem to be written into the fabric of human existence. But there comes a point where reason stands at the edge of a great gulf, seeing the destination on the far side, yet unable to cross by its own strength. Faith is not closing our eyes and jumping without cause. It is stepping forward because reason has led us to the edge and shown us that the bridge, though unseen in its entirety, is there and can be trusted, that we do not live any part of life without exercising faith in some measure. Every decision we make rests on trust in people, in processes, in principles. The farmer plants seeds in the ground, trusting in the unseen process of growth. The traveler boards a plane, trusting the unseen skill of the pilot. The friend confides a secret, trusting in the unseen loyalty of another. None of these are acts of reckless abandonment of thought. They are steps of reasoned trust, based on experience and evidence, yet extending beyond what is visible in the moment. Faith in God works in precisely this way. It does not ask us to turn off our minds, but to follow them to their natural conclusion and then act on what they have discovered. Some treat faith as a purely emotional choice, but genuine faith is never divorced from thought. It begins by observing the world, its order, its beauty, its moral structure, and asking what best explains these things. It weighs the possibilities, tests the claims, and examines the evidence. Then, when the evidence points toward a reality that is larger than ourselves, it calls for a personal response. In that sense, faith is not opposed to evidence. It is the response to evidence when it demands a commitment of the whole self. Reason shows us the door. Faith is the act of walking through it. The relationship between reason and faith can be compared to that between the eyes and the legs. The eyes guide the legs by showing where the path lies, but the legs must move forward if we are to make any progress. Without vision, movement can be aimless or dangerous. Without movement, vision achieves nothing. Reason clarifies the path, discerning truth from falsehood, reality from illusion. Faith moves us forward into the life that truth reveals. To sever the two is to stumble in darkness or to stand still forever. There is a tendency in the modern age to demand absolute proof for matters of faith, as though belief in God should be demonstrated with the same kind of certainty as a mathematical equation. But life itself does not work that way. The most important decisions, whom we marry, what career we pursue, where we live, are made not with absolute certainty, but with reasonable confidence, informed by evidence, yet always involving some risk. If we waited for proof beyond all doubt, we would never take a step forward in anything. Faith in God works on the same principle. It is not about having every question answered, but about having enough light to take the next step. Some think that faith must be set aside in times of difficulty, as though hardship proves it was misplaced. Yet it is often in those very moments, when reason alone cannot make sense of our suffering, that faith reveals its deepest strength. Reason tells us that pain is real, that loss is grievous, that injustice wounds the soul. Faith tells us that these things are not the final word. It holds to the conviction that the author of the story has not abandoned it halfway through, even when the chapter we are in feels dark and unresolved. This is not wishful thinking. It is the same kind of trust we place in a trusted friend who has not yet explained himself, but has proven his character too many times to doubt. Faith also expands the horizon of reason. Without faith, reason is confined to the limits of our own perception and the fragments of evidence we can gather. With faith, reason is liberated to consider realities that lie beyond the immediate and the material. It is like looking at the world through a window that has been thrown open. The landscape is larger, the perspective deeper, the possibilities greater. There is a humility in faith that reason alone cannot produce. Reason, for all its power, can lead us to believe that we can master truth as one might master a skill or a subject. Faith reminds us that truth is not merely a set of propositions to be grasped, but a reality to which we must submit. It tells us that knowing about God is not the same as knowing God, just as reading about the sun is not the same as stepping into its light and warmth. Faith invites us into relationship, not merely recognition, and yet faith without reason is just as incomplete. Blind credulity can lead to superstition, error, and even harm. Reason acts as a safeguard, testing claims, weighing arguments, and ensuring that our trust is well placed. Together, reason and faith form a partnership that is greater than the sum of its parts, reason ensuring that our beliefs are grounded in reality, faith ensuring that our reality is fully embraced and lived. 𝗬𝗎cie faith, as the enemy of reason, is to misunderstand both. Faith does not compete with reason any more than a seed competes with soil. Reason prepares the ground, removing obstacles and nourishing understanding. Faith takes root and grows, reaching toward a light that reason has shown to be there. In the same way, our lives are meant to be cultivated by thought and enriched by trust, so that we may not only know the truth but live within it. Ladies and gentlemen, morality is not an invention of culture or a relic of ancient superstition. It is a law written into the very fabric of our being, as universal and persistent as the laws of nature themselves. Across all ages, nations, and languages, human beings recognize a distinction between right and wrong. The details may vary, but the core principles, honesty over deceit, courage over cowardice, kindness over cruelty, emerge again and again. This moral law is not learned in the same way we learn arithmetic or geography. Rather, it is recognized as if it were already present within us, waiting to be awakened. When we hear of an act of betrayal, something deep within us reacts with outrage. When we witness selfless courage, we feel admiration that cannot be explained merely as personal preference. These responses point to something more than survival instincts or social conditioning. They reveal that we live under a moral order, that if morality were nothing more than a product of evolution or culture, it would carry no binding authority. It would be a matter of taste, like a preference for one kind of music over another. But that is not how we experience it. We do not merely dislike cruelty the way we dislike a bitter flavor. We condemn it as wrong, even if it is committed by those far removed from us or in a different time. We do not merely enjoy honesty the way we enjoy a pleasant scent. We praise it as good, even when it costs the one who practices it. This sense of ought cannot be reduced to mere feelings or majority opinion. Feelings change, opinions shift, cultures evolve, yet the sense of moral obligation persists. It speaks to us as a voice not our own, yet within us, a voice that commands rather than suggests. This moral law is also impartial. It does not bend for our convenience. It accuses us when we fail and demands of us even when obedience is costly. A thief knows he is wrong not only when he is caught, but also when he sees someone steal from him. This strange symmetry that we apply moral standards to others and expect them to apply to us suggests that morality is not the invention of any one person or group, but is a reality we discover rather than create. We can no more change it by decree than we can alter the law of gravity by voting on it. There is a remarkable thing about the moral law. It judges us all, even by our own standards. We excuse ourselves for our failures, we rationalize our compromises, yet we know deep down when we fall short. This knowledge is uncomfortable, so we often try to suppress it, distracting ourselves with noise or numbing ourselves with justifications. But the voice remains. We may muffle it, but we cannot silence it completely, and its persistence suggests that it does not come from within us alone. If it were merely the echo of human desire, we could reshape it at will. But it resists our reshaping, standing over us with authority, pointing us toward a standard that is higher than ourselves. If there is a moral law, then there must be a moral lawgiver. A law requires a source, and in the case of the moral law, that source cannot be human society alone. Societies disagree, individuals rebel, yet the law stands binding on all. Its universality points beyond humanity to something greater, something eternal. Some might suggest that the moral law is simply a byproduct of our need to live together, a social contract written into our instincts. Yet this does not explain why we often feel compelled to act against our own interests for the sake of what is right, even when no one else will know. The soldier who falls on a grenade to save his comrades, the stranger who risks his life to rescue a child. These acts cannot be reduced to calculations of survival. They speak of a loyalty to something higher than personal gain. The moral law also carries with it a sense of purpose. It not only tells us what is right and wrong, but also seems to imply that life itself has a direction, a meaning that is bound up with living in harmony with this law. When we live in accordance with it, we feel a sense of alignment, as though we are participating in the way things are meant to be. When we violate it, we feel dissonance, a fracture between who we are and who we ought to be. This sense of purpose is not an illusion. It is an indication that morality is woven into the structure of reality itself. Some try to escape the moral law by denying its authority, insisting that each person must define right and wrong for themselves. But even those who claim this often betray themselves by appealing to justice, fairness, or rights when they feel wronged. The moment we say, "That's not fair," we acknowledge that there is a standard beyond personal opinion. In this way, even the moral relativist lives as though the moral law were real, appealing to it when convenient and resisting it when it makes demands. This universal, authoritative, and purposeful moral law points toward a mind behind the universe that is not only powerful but also good. It suggests that the same intelligence that set the stars in motion and shaped the laws of physics also cares about honesty, justice, mercy, and love. This is a staggering thought, that the author of the cosmos is also the author of the moral law written on the human heart. And if that is true, then morality is not merely a set of abstract rules, but the reflection of the character of the one who gave it. Our sense of right and wrong is, in this way, an echo of his nature, calling us not only to obey, but to know the one from whom it comes. Ladies and gentlemen, the human longing for meaning is as deep and persistent as the thirst for water or the hunger for bread. We may distract ourselves with work, entertainment, or ambition, but sooner or later, the question rises to the surface: why are we here? The world around us offers countless voices, each proposing an answer. Some say our purpose is to seek happiness, others to advance society, others still to survive and reproduce. Yet beneath all these answers is a nagging sense that something greater is missing, that the horizon of human life extends beyond mere existence. We sense that life must have significance beyond what can be measured in years or achievements, a significance that endures even when circumstances change. This hunger for meaning is not a quirk of culture or a passing phase of history. It is a universal feature of humanity found in every civilization and age. It is not satisfied by wealth, for many who have abundance still feel empty. It is not silenced by pleasure, for indulgence often leaves a deeper restlessness. And it is not answered by power, for even the most influential grow weary when faced with the question of what all their influence is for. The longing for meaning is like a homesickness for a place we have never fully seen but somehow remember. We encounter beauty, a sunset, a piece of music, the smile of a child, and it awakens a yearning that nothing in this world seems able to fully satisfy. We strive to capture these moments, to hold on to them, but they slip through our fingers, leaving behind a bittersweet ache. That ache is not an accident. It is a signpost pointing beyond the immediate and the material, hinting that our true fulfillment lies elsewhere. We may try to explain it away as the byproduct of evolutionary impulses, yet it remains stubbornly personal, insistent, and resistant to reduction. It feels like a call, not from within ourselves alone, but from beyond. This desire for ultimate meaning is not a weakness. It is evidence that we were made for more than the sum of our biological parts. A creature's natural desires have natural fulfillments. Hunger corresponds to food, thirst to water, fatigue to rest. If we find in ourselves a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, it is reasonable to consider that we were made for another world. This does not mean we despise the world we live in. Rather, it means we see it as a shadow of a greater reality, a reality in which the longing for meaning finds its rest. Our daily lives may be filled with ordinary tasks and responsibilities, but even in the most routine moments, this quiet sense of there must be more whispers to us. It is a reminder that the story of our lives is part of a larger narrative. Human history is filled with attempts to answer the question of meaning without reference to anything beyond ourselves. Some have turned to philosophy, constructing systems of thought that attempt to give purpose to existence through reason alone. Others have turned to art, pouring their longing into music, literature, and visual beauty. Still, others have turned to relationships, seeking in love the completeness they cannot find in solitude. These are noble pursuits, but they often end in frustration when we discover that even the deepest love, the most profound art, or the most carefully reasoned philosophy cannot fully quench the thirst. They are like cups of cool water on a long journey. They refresh us, but they are not the destination. This longing for meaning also shapes our moral instincts. We want our lives to matter, and we want them to matter in a way that is bound up with what is good, true, and beautiful. Few people wish for their legacy to be one of harm, deception, or destruction. Even those who live selfishly often desire, at least in part, to be remembered well. This suggests that our search for meaning is tied to the moral law we all sense within ourselves. That to live a meaningful life is to live in accordance with a standard higher than our own desires. Yet, if this standard is only of human origin, then our longing for meaning is in vain, for no human system can guarantee permanence. If all ends in nothingness, then meaning itself is an illusion, and yet, deep down, we resist that conclusion. We act as though meaning is real, as though love and justice and beauty have significance that transcends the moment. When we grieve a loss, we are not merely lamenting the disappearance of atoms arranged in a familiar pattern. We are grieving something infinitely precious. When we celebrate acts of courage or compassion, we are not merely recognizing biological advantage, we are honoring something noble. This language of nobility, this sense of transcendence, reveals that our lives are woven into a reality larger than ourselves, one that grants significance to even the smallest acts of kindness or truth. The persistence of this longing, despite centuries of skepticism and cynicism, is remarkable. Attempts to suppress it often lead to despair or to the frantic chase after substitutes, fame, wealth, pleasure, that eventually leave us empty. But when we acknowledge the longing and follow it honestly, we find that it points in a consistent direction, toward a source of meaning that is not bound by time, change, or death. This source must be personal, for only a personal reality can satisfy the personal nature of our longing. It must be good, for our longing is not only for existence, but for what is right and just, and it must be greater than ourselves, for only something greater can fulfill the desire that nothing smaller can meet.